So last night, I saw this guy right here's movie, Godzilla 2014, and I really liked it. This review is going to be first part, non-spoiler. That'll give you a chance to go away if you don't want spoilers. Then I'll come back in with the full spoilery ending to it, just so that I can just do one review and not have to make two. Saw the movie last night at my local theater. It was me, my girlfriend, my friend Colin, and my girlfriend's friend. And well, first off, nobody was taking tickets. I bought mine in advance. Nobody was taking tickets at the theater, so I really could have just seen this movie for free. But our little movie-going group consisted of course, me, who's a huge Godzilla fan, and Colin and my girlfriend. They've seen movies. My girlfriend doesn't have a choice. They're on a lot lately in this house. And then her friend had not seen any of them previously, so kind of got the full spectrum of opinions on it, I think, between the four. But in case you don't know, this is a fresh reboot to the series. Stars Aaron Taylor Johnson, Elizabeth Olsen, Ken Watanabe, and Bryan Cranston. And of course, Godzilla. I have to say this, the casting of Aaron Taylor Johnson and Elizabeth Olsen is a little weird because you guys see them make out in this movie. Then in about a year, we're going to go back to theaters to see them playing brother and sister in Avengers 2. That's a little awkward. But, you know, Game of Thrones is really popular right now, so I guess they're just trying to get some of that. And the biggest thing I could say about this movie, non-spoilery, is the pacing is unique. I've heard it compared to Jaws and Aliens. I don't think it lives up to quite that level of coolness, but it's a slow build. If you've ever seen Gareth Edwards' other monster movie called Monsters, which I've never finished, because I kind of just get distracted with it half the time and never really finish watching it all the way through, but that movie is a lot of, we're going to go through this quarantine zone, and there's cities that once were human cities, but now are overrun by nature, and we get little hints of monsters around there, and maybe we'll see one at a great distance, but we're not really close to it. There's a lot of that in his original movie, and this is kind of like the big budget remake of that. The beginning, there's a lot of stuff going on. You see the same kind of cities that are reclaimed by nature and things like that. And really, you don't get a whole lot of monster action until the very end of the film. So people going in expecting a monster palooza, you're not going to get it here. It's a little more true to, well, the classic Godzilla films. You would get a lot of human interaction, a lot of human stuff going on. The threat of the monster's there, but it takes a while to get to the knockdown, drag-out fight. This thing is not Pacific Rim. I really thought, because legendary Warner Brothers, a year later, doing another giant monster movie, I thought it would be a similar film. But it really is a lot more subdued. It's not rock'em sock'em robots like Pacific Rim is. I'm not saying that in a bad way, but you kind of do have to temper your expectation. I went in already knowing about this issue. People from previous screenings had talked about it, so I kind of felt like it was better to see it that way, knowing that it was going to be kind of a slow build towards the monsters, and, well, just not Pacific Rim, where it's constantly things getting punched in the face, and it really did surprise me how different this was to that film. I really was expecting something a little more similar, just from the same studios. Now, saying the monsters don't come until the end, you do get plenty of teases of them, which I guess is where the comparisons to Jaws become apt. In Jaws, you never really saw the whole shark until the very end. You get little bits of them, you get destruction, things like that. And that's pretty much how it works. And of course, being a giant monster fan, it's hard not to compare it to other giant monster movies. I saw little bits of Cloverfield in here, as they really seem to want to focus on a human perspective. It's not as we'd see it in the Japanese films, where the monsters would basically be shot from, if you were imagining the cameraman on the set with the monsters, the cameraman would be basically the height of the monsters. In this, we get a lot of scenes, even when there aren't people there, we will see the shot taken from the angle of basically a normal human height, maybe on a building or on the ground, up at the monsters, giving you kind of a perspective of the size. However, I don't know if it's just the way the cities are built in this movie, or the modern cities as they tried to replicate them, but there are a lot of things going around online about, this is the biggest Godzilla ever, he's never been taller in a film. And that is technically true. This Godzilla, from what I've read, clocks in at 106 meters tall. When people are showing these pictures, size charts of like, oh, he dwarfs every previous incarnation of Godzilla. That's not true. His original incarnation was about 50 meters tall. I think they bumped him up to like 75, 80 meters tall when they rebooted for the Heisei series. And then in 1991, in Godzilla vs. King Ghidorah, he came back larger than ever at 100 meters tall. So 6 meters of height difference, not really that big of a deal. But the monsters in this never felt overly large. That actually really surprised me. There's a lot of reasons why Toho didn't keep that scale when they rebooted for the Millennium series, and part of it was it just made it hard to interact with people. A big reason of doing it was because the buildings couldn't be sculpted as well and as detailed, and when you made bigger monsters, having to scale things down that much more, you lost a lot in the production values, but with CG, of course, that's not as big of a worry. But still, it really did surprise me the way they worked with scale. The roar of Godzilla, I was a little left wanting. I am going to go see the movie again in IMAX, mostly not because of the larger screen, but because I want a better sound system in the theater with me. So hopefully, next chance I get, I'm going to go see it in true IMAX 3D and just get the full-on effect. But the roar was a little lacking. You had that first part, the classic beginning of a Godzilla roar, and in the trailers you'll hear the beginning of it, and then whenever they fade to the Godzilla title sequence, they would do the reverb, which is a little hot and cold on the fact that they were going to make it this reverb noise as opposed to actually part of the vocalization. But he barely ever does that in the movie, and his vocalization varies quite a bit. There's a lot of just more guttural growls and grunts and things that he does, along with the classic roar, or at least the first half of the classic roar. And as for the overall look, so far of what I've picked up, I think this giant Jakks Pacific figure is the best representation. The head isn't nearly as small as a lot of other things have made it look, and I think it looks pretty good. The feet are still stupid, but everything else on him I think looked decent. He didn't look fat like a lot of people were worried about. He looked like a beast. It's good. And the one last thing I have to comment on, and I don't understand movie promos sometimes, but in interviews before the film, they were talking about how, oh, they might not actually even say Godzilla in this film. And thinking back to it, I think they actually said Bryan Cranston may not say Godzilla in this film, which is true, but Ken Watanabe calls him Gojira. And then immediately, every Western character in the film begins calling him Godzilla. It almost felt like a bad joke, but I kind of went with it. Alright, so that is it for the non-spoiler section. If you haven't seen the movie yet, I recommend it. Go see it. Go experience it. Have fun. But I'm giving you this warning. We're about to go to Spoiler Town. You good? Alright, here we go. So, first thing off the bat, I am amazed how little Bryan Cranston was in the film. I really did not expect him to get taken out so soon, but assuming that he's probably the highest paid actor in the whole production, it makes sense. But he is all over the trailers, all over the promotional material, all over promoting this movie. And it's surprising that he's taken out so quickly. And I'm kind of glad, I have to say, because I found him pretty unlikable in this. Not as an actor, but just his character. His character was a dick. He was obsessive, and I understand having your wife die, losing your home, losing everything in one fell swoop. It's gonna mess with you, but to see the way it had alienated him with his kid, there's basically two ways it could go. He was gonna die, or there was gonna be a redemption story in this, and I honestly was weighing in more on the side that it would be a redemption story, and we definitely did not get that. I'm intrigued by the fact that they made it prehistoric monsters. That is, of course, classic Godzilla. A lot of his foes are also ancient creatures that were sleeping for years and years and resurrected by radiation. But the thing I thought was interesting is that they had the radiation as always present. Godzilla was always a radioactive monster, just from the way the Earth used to be. And it's not purely a, oh, it was mutated by atomic testing. Atomic testing was actually used to try to stop these monsters in the 50s, which I think is a unique take on it. I think it kind of downplays the nuclear metaphor that Godzilla was in the original Japanese movie, but I can kind of understand why you do that. The Muto monsters, I really do hope we get some more action figures of those. All we have right now are very little ones. I hope they do. Maybe not this big, but, NECA, Bandai Japan, I'm hoping we'll get some out. But I really like how they came off in this movie. I got a very heavy Rodan vibe for the fact that there were two of them, the male and female, the mates, and the fact that one could fly, it kind of, to me, made it be very Rodan. The original Rodan, there's two monsters that are attacking Japan. The look of them was a little Cloverfield and a little Gigan. I was kind of surprised the red kind of unibeam eye and the hooked claws and everything. It said Gigan to me, and I was kind of wondering if there was going to be some reference to it in some weird way. They also kind of had a beak going on, so that kind of fits that as well. The Muto, or Muto, I guess I should call them. That's how they pronounce it in the movie, but I've been calling them Muto since, like, it was announced that they existed, so it's going to be hard to break that habit. But I don't think they're going to go down in the annals as one of the greatest Godzilla villains. They seem fairly forgettable, but thank goodness they gave him something to fight. It was so much better than 98 or even the 80s film where they had him come back and fight nothing. Well, they had him fight the Super X, but also the Super X was lame as hell. But you need to have Godzilla fighting something his own size, fighting something equal, stronger to him. I think it worked really well. I was very surprised that Ken Watanabe's character was Dr. Serizawa in name only. He didn't have much of an arm. I mean, he knew Godzilla, which I guess that wasn't even in the original movie. It's basically just, hey, he's a Japanese doctor, Japanese scientist. And we didn't really get much further than that. He didn't sacrifice himself or anything at the end. He didn't create a means of destroying Godzilla. He kind of came up with the way to get this all to come to a head, but it's not the same thing. Another thing I'm kind of hot and cold on the movie was the fact that the Muto had EMP built in, that they could create this disruption area, but it was something they had to actually trigger. It wasn't on a kind of natural cycle, or it wasn't something that just kind of carried with them. They just had to be like, oh, look, there's lights around me. I should hit that EMP and stop this. At times it seemed like it was a little more natural, and it would just kind of flow out of them. And other times it seemed like it was something they had to conjure up. So I'm assuming it was something they had to conjure up just because that makes more sense. It was a little weird. I liked it for what it did for the movie. I liked that you were able to shut off all the lights, and I think it was particularly effective in Hawaii, where I was thinking in movies like this, it's like, well, yeah, it's nighttime, but there's so many lights, and even if you destroy the buildings around you, there's still lights coming from other places. There's so much light pollution in modern cities, but to be able to shut off every last bit of that, and just really have the stars and the moon as the only active light source, that it was kind of effective. It was neat. It was something you don't really see too often. My absolute favorite scenes in the movie, there were quite a few that I really enjoyed. One of the most simple ones is when the military is taking Godzilla to go hunt for the Muto, and you see the destroyers, battleships, whatever. I haven't played Battleship in years. I don't remember what they're all called, but you see them in the water, and then you just see the spines of Godzilla cutting through the water next to them. And I thought it was very heroic, very cool looking, and I liked that Godzilla was a hero in this. He's been a hero more than he's been a villain in the movies, so it was kind of nice to not be like, oh, Godzilla's going to kill us all. Ah. They already had another monster to do that. The lead up to the showdown in Hawaii, I loved. I know some people are not happy with the way the Hawaii battle actually took place on TV instead of on the screen for them to see in full frame, but I thought it was really funny. I got a big laugh out of me, and I feel like the final battle kind of made up for what we didn't get to see there. The death of the two Muto creatures I thought was really cool and really effective looking. The tail smash was very nice, very bloody, very well done, and the vomiting radioactive fire down the other one's neck was just awesome. And it does lead me into a couple issues I have. The radioactive fire, I don't think the fire itself looked as good. It was trying to be a little too realistic, and I think it came out a little wimpier looking than I'm used to. Nothing bad, nothing horrible, but it wasn't as good as I kind of would have liked. I would have liked more of the Heisei era, just a full blast Dragon Ball Z beam, I guess. But I love that when his spine started charging, it starts at the end of his tail and just kind of whirs fireworks. It's way up to the head. And it's like, if you're a fan of these movies, you know what's coming. It's one of the most savored build-ups to an atomic breath I've ever seen in a Godzilla film, and I love it. Before that, I think Godzilla 2000 took the cake for me on that, where you see the slow, sizzling charge of his spines. This was a great charge-up sequence. I really dug it. But the whole end battle suffered from just odd awareness of humans. I never really think of Godzilla as being something that pays humans much mind. Ironically, the line I kept thinking of was from Avengers of, an ant has no quarrel with a boot. That's basically what it should be, but there's a lot of scenes of both the Muto and Godzilla taking full notice of the humans around them and interacting with them. And I'm cool with Godzilla being a hunter and going after the Muto, being a natural thing that he would do or whatever in his instincts, but defending humans did not seem like it should have been an instinctual thing. But there were many times that he basically came out and was just like, hey, no, don't touch the people. Don't touch them. I got this. Hey, no. Bad Muto. Didn't really dig that as much. And also, they kind of fixed it by having him basically be on his last legs after killing the first Muto, but I didn't like the fact that they're like, oh, he's an apex predator, he's hunting. And I really didn't get much in terms of him trying to eat the Muto. I didn't see that as being prey. I saw that as being maybe instinctual rivals or something. But apex predator hunting, he should have tried to eat the stupid things. They kind of didn't give him the chance to, but I don't know. It felt a little iffy for me. One of my other favorite things was that they used the TV, as I talked about with the Hawaii fight. We get to see that fight played out on TV. I love the end with the big king of the monsters, savior of our city on TV. I mean, that's awesome. It really was awesome. So I think that's everything I wanted to talk about with Godzilla. I highly recommend the movie. I'm going to go see it again in IMAX, at least see it one more time while it's in theaters, probably more if I could swing it. It was great. I really thoroughly enjoyed myself. I think the people I went to see it with thoroughly enjoyed themselves. I just hope it makes a good amount of money, because I would love a sequel. I would really like to see this guy back, this design of Godzilla, modified version of it. I want to see more in this universe. They teased Mothra. I think it's more of an in-joke for fans. But they had a butterfly cage with Mothra written on it, and it'd be good to see Godzilla fight another classic Toho monster if they could get the rights to do it. This is not the abomination that the 98 was. This was a Godzilla film. There is no doubt in my mind that this was Godzilla and not some iguana. And even if other people don't agree, and it doesn't make its money, if it gets Toho off their ass to go make another Godzilla film their way, I'm down for that too.